The next panel will uncover how telecom companies can optimize operations, leverage generative AI, and adopt cloud-first strategies to scale and innovate their networks. I'd like to invite on stage the following panelists: Dr. Ibrahim Gideon, Executive Director, Guardian SafetyNet; Daniel Moussouf, VP, Head of Technology and Solution Sales, Nokia; Shadi Khufash, Senior Sales Director of South Middle East, Fortinet; Ari Banerjee, Chief Strategy Officer, Netcracker Technology; and moderating the panel is Mu'taz Mustafa, Telco BD and GTM Leader, Middle East and Africa, AWS. Put our hands together for your panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mu'taz Mustafa, and I'm a business development leader for Middle East and Africa and AWS. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to our panel about network cloudification at scale for telecom and IT workloads. In today's rapidly evolving digital landscape, telecom service provider faces unprecedented challenges, but also opportunities. The introduction of 5G, cloud computing, generative AI is disrupting the traditional business model that telecoms are adopting today, but also introduces opportunities for scalability, agility, and introducing new customer-centric services. Our esteemed panelists today, they are in forefront of the transformation of those different new services, and today they will share their perspective on how those different initiatives is affecting the 5G, OSS, BSS, and also IMS from a network agility perspective. So without further ado, I'll pass over the introduction to starting with Dr. Ibrahim. Please, you can give the introduction about yourself and how the background and how it's relevant to the topic.
Cool. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be very brief because we're running a bit behind. So I'm an engineer. I was working in the telco space for the last 40 years, 20 years as a vendor, 20 years as an operator. Really excited to talk about cloud. I hope we're going to get into some details because keeping it generic is like saying, let's talk about H2O or the internet or so. That's a brief intro. Looking forward to it. On to you, Daniel.
So thank you. First of all, thank you for having us here at Telecom Review. It's been an absolutely amazing day. So I'm leading technology and solutions for Middle East and Africa. I've got my previous boss, Bernard Najm, who was on the stage, and my current boss sitting next to each other and smiling. I'm not sure what I should think of that, but I've been in telco for about 20 years, 4 years in Middle East and Africa, and mostly spent my life in telecommunications. So again, happy to speak about cloud, hopefully some detail, and look forward to the panel.
First of all, thank you, everyone. It's great to be part of this event every year. My name is Shadi Khufash, and I manage Fortinet's South Middle East business and the service provider business for the past 11 years. And I've seen massive transformation in the cybersecurity landscape, and in my conversations, I'm going to be focused around this topic. But looking forward for this exciting panel, and hopefully continue to do this engagement and share best practices between different industry players.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ari Banerjee. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Netcracker. First of all, thanks to Telecom Review for setting up this wonderful, wonderful event. I mean, they do a great job every year, so it's, again, great to be here. Great to be here with everybody here as well. So I lead global strategy for Netcracker, which means any of the go-to-market initiatives, including product marketing, product management, as well as dealing with standard bodies, et cetera, and working with customers. That's kind of the remit. So,
perfect. So my first question is for all. However, I'm going to start with Dr. Ibrahim. So what are the key trends that you see in the areas of network cloudifications across the industry, telecom industry?
I think, Mu'taz, and to our colleagues here, we have to decouple putting stuff on the cloud from cloud native.
Yeah.
I think putting stuff on the cloud or lift and shift makes sense when the resources you have are too expensive compared to what the hyperscalers such as AWS and Azure and others are. I think the move towards cloud native and actually digital first, cloud first efforts are still not there, right? So if you look at some of the work on IMS and on core, on the core, which like AWS is one of the leaders at, I think they're happening slowly. And there's a bit of apprehension in terms of if something goes wrong, who do I call versus hosting it there. So I think the issue is more cultural than technical when you talk about cloud native and adopting that in that aspect. From pure CPU and overflow, I think it makes a lot of sense to put stuff in the cloud, especially you do so much more of it. It's like, why would you go buy meat from the baker? You'd buy it from the butcher. Not that you guys are butchers, but you do so much friggin' cloud. Why in the hell not buy cloud from you guys versus build your own, right? So
Yeah. So it's more not technology related, it's more...
It's cultural, and then I will, no disrespect to Nokia and the vendors we have here, but a lot of their applications are not really cloud native. They're coming, but the first instance was, let's take you to the cloud and charge you a lot of money without impacting the end client.
Oh, really?
So I think that was the first foray.
Yeah.
Things are much different now. Like we're 5-6 years into people talking about cloud, and I think there's a lot of cloud native. Like I know a lot of the work Netcracker has done, for example, have not kept in touch with Nokia, but things are now different than are you going to cloud 5 years ago.
Understood. Shadi, if maybe you want to share also some perspective.
Absolutely. I actually tend to agree with my colleague here.
We should disagree. Guys, the problem I have with these panels is we're always agreeing with each
but
other.
it's a great point. It's a culture thing, and I'm going to speak from a cybersecurity standpoint. Security is a major topic and conversation we're having with most of our service provider customers. You know, especially moving or migrating from on-prem data centers to the cloud, moving applications. It's a completely new mindset, and sometimes it hinders that movement, or it's not done appropriately. And you know, cybersecurity is a key element in this transition. Because it's a different approach to how to secure your assets. It's no longer a 3-tier architecture of how you deploy an application on-prem, but now it's microservices and containers. The threat landscape is massive. So you can't use traditional security processes and apply them on the cloud. So it's absolutely imperative to have this conversation at an early stage, understand the needs, requirements, the training, the enablement part before making that transition. So these are some of the trends, and
Yeah.
it's a heavy discussion that we're having.
Now that makes sense from a security perspective on the trends. From a Netcracker perspective, and I know it's pretty much advanced specifically on IT workloads, BSS, OSS, but if we really look into the OSS aspect of it, which touches the network in a way, how do you see the trend going, Arif?
Yeah, so let me, I mean, before I get into it, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll touch upon Ibrahim's point, right?
Yeah.
You got to move at the speed of the business, right? I mean, at the end of the day, right? Nobody here is doing charity. So we are not going to, or any of the vendors, not going to just move into cloud native.
Yeah.
Because the next thing is going to be, okay, we'll buy it modular, we're going to pay you 1/10 the price, right? So the transformation happened a few years back. Let's go back a little bit, right? SDN NFV.
Yeah.
Virtual IMS,
Yeah.
the whole virtualization. So slowly, the whole thing around moving away from proprietary hardware centric to decoupling the software with the, with the white box, that started to happen. That's the initial part of the journey. And then came, okay, is it the cost that we are going to play with, or is it the business agility that we are looking for? And I think the transition to a cloud environment today, or the public cloud or a hybrid cloud, we call it, the business case is about agility.
Yeah.
How quickly can I scale it up? How quickly can I scale it down? And so on and so forth. That impacts the software. So for us, for example, if we talk about OSS, network today is basically software, if I may take it to a little, put it a little bit ahead. And in that case, if you're talking about the movement of your virtual network functions, some not so virtualized network functions, some legacy, you got to bring it together in a service chain. And operations plays a very, very important role in that, because you cannot do that You cannot have the business agility, you cannot have the time to market without orchestrating that in the right level. That's one. The second, how do you assure those services? Because when you move from proprietary hardware to these virtual network functions, every one of them have the different mechanisms, different licensing schemas, different ways their uptime and downtimes are. How do you manage it effectively, especially when you're talking about an SLA-centric services, to make sure that the operators will not be penalized because some of the functions in the chain just dropped or didn't really work, or the license just kind of expired, what have you, right? How do you make that happen? The role of operations, both from a fulfillment, planning, and assurance, all of that plays a major, major role, especially as we look at the operators moving into a cloud or transformation of the cloud functions. Let's not forget the BSS as well, right? I mean, we talk OSS.
Quite advanced.
Remember, when we talk about different VNFs being chained together, it's not coming from one vendor. How do you manage the partners? How do you manage the contracts? How do you manage the settlements? How do you make sure the license management happens in the right way? So there is an element of BSS that we tend to forget, but becomes very part of it, because it's essential to make this value chain work very effectively.
Great, understood. Yeah, and then when it touches more the trend around the network, when it comes to radio access and core and so on, what is your perspective, Daniel?
So first of all, I won't agree.
Agree, it's okay. Disagree, man.
No, I think what's critical, I do have to say that I think if you go back a couple of years, we were having this problem with realizing what it should bring in terms of TCO, what it brings in terms of the benefit to the customer. And I don't think we saw that initially. And the reason we didn't see that is because bringing legacy together, moving VNFs, doing things together, it takes a lot of effort for integrating these efforts together.
Thank you.
And that meant more cost initially. And if you take that from a core perspective, where we're working with our partner AWS across Europe, we have multiple customers, but we're also partners on Cloud RAN. And if you look at Cloud RAN, when we look at some of the initial trials, where is the problem? The problem is when you bring all the technologies together, there's a lot of integration effort that goes in. And that doesn't translate immediately to some TCO benefit for our customer. So I think it's merging together. I think we're starting to see some elements come together where the end user or the customer sees benefit of cloudification. That's number one. The second thing is, it would be, like Bernard said and everyone has said since morning, AI is going to start playing a role into it, and that means traffic loads are going to go up significantly. So Bell Labs did some study recently this year. It said 24% CAGR of traffic loads, and that can vary. We all look at the industry in different ways in terms of forecasts. But if it is 24 to 30%, that has a huge impact on the scalability of what needs to happen on the cloud. So I think those elements coming together, the benefits are going to start coming in as we go forward in the next couple of years. I do want to add one point, which is about edge, right? The edge data center architectures are going to start appearing everywhere. And that means that there is going to be video we recently did where we had Miko in Ghana, where we had an immersive demo being done. These immersive videos will appear more and more, and that's where edge will start playing a bigger role in terms of what can you look at some of the use cases that will be driven, may it be spatial computing or immersive videos and so on. So I think we're finally at that cusp of change where, to your point, we will start seeing that merge of technology driving the right monetization aspect for the operator as well as others in the ecosystem. But again, I would like to emphasize Cloud RAN. You mentioned radio, and we'll probably talk about it. Representing mobile networks here from Nokia, I think Cloud RAN is a very exciting space for us to look at as well, because this is just at the start. We're just doing trials. We're looking at how we can move that forward with the right application and right use cases, and probably not forgetting how do we reduce the overall TCO, because that's the benefit. At the end of the day, the scalability, the agility needs to be augmented by a strong benefit on cost, which is a concern.
Like,
I see you want to add something.
no, but I'm like, it's price performance. It's always price performance.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the business case or the TCO, it's 100% that needs to be factored in. But a lot of the movement was, I don't envision anybody in this room not thinking in the context of what cloud would be or cloud native. Now, the question to pull the plug, whether it makes sense or not.
Yeah.
And I think now you're seeing a lot of the systems like, first of all, I'm excited that Nokia is doing Cloud RAN, like it's wonderful. It's only been like 40 years of the vendors asking for independence to do it. No, I think it's good. But what I'm saying is you're inserting something into legacy. As soon as you're 1 year old in a digital age, you have legacy.
Yeah.
So as soon as you have legacy, you're dealing with the people, with the culture, but more importantly, what is the performance you're giving me? And for now, today, the performance is financial based on ramp up or ramp down. In terms of impact on the actual end customer, our end customers, they don't give a,
Yeah.
they don't care.
Beep.
There's zero impact on their actual experience. So when we talk about cloud, it's like when we talk about our underwear. Like my underwear is my own, you guys don't see it. That's the same thing with the decision by the telco on cloud because the actual user does not see it. They see it and they sell with, like Bernard talked about it, there was a couple of panels. When you start buying services that are cloud-based, you get that agility. But when we talk about the core, it's for our own benefit. It's for getting that resiliency. That's why if you look at almost every telco around the world is looking, if they have the money, is looking at cloud core as a backup because they're afraid it's the primary. It's just fear of the fear. There's no logical reason. There's no science behind it.
Can I just add one comment?
Yeah.
If you,
Only one?
yeah, just
Quickly.
one.
Okay,
Just
go
so just because I think Cloud RAN has an opportunity to do two things. I agree with you, the consumer, the end customer doesn't see it. But if you change that and you look at Cloud RAN as a potential to businesses, enterprises, non-CSP customers, the benefit will be seen by the end customer and what you're able to do with Cloud RAN today. Now, maybe there is a scope of 2 years on where we're going to get there, but that also changes a little bit of the mix.
You know what, like, so guys, I'm very old here. I remember something called X25. And then after that, there's something called frame relay. For those who learned it at school when you were like 3 years old or something, they started talking about frame relay with EIR and CIR. Do you remember that? Look, he's too young to remember that. There was guaranteed bandwidth, ATM had it, and then something you burst into it. Not one telco was able to charge for excess and guaranteed. We suck at it.
Yeah.
You know, gold, silver, bronze, like red, yellow, green. How many times have we done the prioritization? Who's making money off slicing? Oh, that was a dream, I forgot. Yeah, nobody's making money off freaking slicing, but no, everybody wants to sell slicing.
Yeah.
I think we suck at it. So thank
And
you.
we need to get better at it.
Well, I don't know how we're going to get better because as soon as this competition, without naming which country, but if one telco announces something, the other one wants to outdo it, like we're dying to give money away. And then you come, you want to sell us stuff that we can't monetize. Like, I'm not being negative, I'm being realistic.
No,
Well, actually, I brought a couple of examples with me, which practical examples.
Somebody
I can
has
show.
sold priority.
Yeah, similar.
he wants to play a video.
So it's an example which goes beyond the traditional cloudification of OSS, BSS, which becomes sort of like the norm now. So it's more on the core network. So we have a case in Telefonica Germany where Malik Rao, who is the CTIO, actually decided to embark this transformation journey with AWS, running their 5G core as Telefonica Germany, together with Nokia on AWS. So I would like actually to show the case to the audience here, if you can play the video, please.
Are you moderating? You're putting advertisement for AWS.
No, it's for cloud.
AWS.
Adopting the public.
And Nokia, just,
Ah, the
maybe we
audio is
should
not
leave,
working.
guys. What do you think? Just do a...
Telecom is good in adopting, but we're not good at disrupting ourselves. And that is something cloud as a technology was really attractive for us, which disrupts ourselves in terms of technology, in terms of operating model, in terms of culture. So these are the three essential elements for me when we started off this whole journey of cloud at the core of telecom. We've been working with AWS to bring core functions of telecom onto public cloud. It took, of course, 3 years for us to go there, bringing the services quicker to the market, innovating on services. That was the primary reason for us. And of course, working with AWS and in this case with Nokia on the packet core software for the 5G standalone. The outcome for the customer, what we were trying to drive with this solution is how can you scale quickly? How can you deploy software in-service upgrades and also innovate these services? When we've been connecting say, core network with the internet, however, if you want to go with 5G standalone, 5G advanced, low latency applications, and that's where we want to be quickly to the time to the market. What I really like working with AWS is it has agility at the core of it. Because the journey when we started off, the public cloud was not ready for taking the telecom applications. And then the agility of AWS was really impressive. And that's where I felt very confident that I can take the core of my systems into public cloud. It's agility, it's nimbleness, and also learning. And it took 3 years for both of us to really learn. And today we have 1 million customers working live in the Frankfurt region. I get more and more confidence that I can move millions of customers onto this platform, what we have created last 3.5 years.
So, this example shows that cloudification of a 5G core is not just a pilot anymore. So there are some telecom service providers who start to adopt this for commercial deployment. And it's actually happening in multiple places. So now, question to Daniel.
Sorry, Mu'taz, before, why is he doing it?
To agility. Yeah, so I'm not going to be the...
No, I just would like to understand, like, what's his number one driver? Is it TCO?
Yeah,
Is it ramp up, ramp down? It's not client experience, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would say it's scalability and agility. Those are the key. Then TCO, of course, plays a role. But when you look into really the savings that you can do by introducing scalability faster to the market, that's also money. It's not just about the cost of the infrastructure itself. But yeah, so now, given what we've seen happening there now, how do you see such transformation happening in telcos in the Middle East and Africa when it comes to network cloudification?
I think this morning we heard from Do, for example, and they talked about some of the initiatives they have. Do has 5G SA now. They're already looking at it. We see SA being a discussed opportunity across Middle East and Africa. So even if you go UAE, the operators here, as well as discussions going on with Saudi operators as well. So that's obviously an opportunity to look at SA and look at cloudification from there. That helps them gain, depending on their spectrum assets, gain advantages in different areas, especially with lower spectrum. The recent spectrum licensing also opens opportunities across for the operators here in this region to do so. I think there is also another element which comes out to focus on, I know you mentioned slicing and network monetization APIs. We discussed this briefly, but I think that is something that's going to get more dominant, right? Because as you move towards moving workloads and looking at monetization elements, we have a network monetization platform in Nokia, and we want to see if enterprise can gain advantages of using that monetization layer more and more. And that goes in hand, in congruence, I would say, with what we can do with AWS and other hyperscalers as well. So there is an opportunity, and this is not just an opportunity, this is an active discussion we're having with many of the operators. Yeah. So we have a pipeline of opportunity. One thing he said in there, it took 3 years, and that's really the reality. It's taking a long time for us to realize the true fruition of that, and that's going to speed up. That's the scale and replication and repeatability that brings in. If I look at it from the RAN perspective, again, I have to always look at AWS to Nokia. I think deployment of smarter CapEx is very important, right? And I think that's becoming a little bit of an issue. The cloudification is a trend, but you also need to have more surgical deployment of RAN. I think that's not there today. For example, 37% of this Middle East and Africa, this is from a mobile broadband index report that we produce as Nokia, 80% of the traffic is being carried about 37 to 40% of the site. So the surgical deployment, the smart CapEx deployment has to change. And that'll have an inverse effect on how that TCO looks, because you cannot just look at the core, you can't just look at the cloudification, you've got to look at the whole thing. And that's an important element, which is a big spend for operators as well. So these are active conversations. They're not dream conversations. These are pipelines. There are opportunities that we're working on together with AWS. And of course, we're trying to also use the Cloud RAN elements to open up enterprises. And that's something that's quite relevant. We did a Cloud RAN field trial with Do. Salim was here this morning. We did a press release recently. This is an actual field trial where we're looking at Cloud RAN. And together with AWS, we plan to have quite a few more of these in the region in the next few years.
Thank you, Daniel. And I think from North America and also Europe, we see the adoption is growing. So again, Dr. Ibrahim, from your perspective, the region here has its own specificities. So how do you see the adoption growing here versus North America, for example?
Well, I think it's a very different value proposition. I think for North America, the capital, and Daniel talked about it, is a huge, being more efficient on capital, not so much on the radio itself, but more so on after the radio, right? So if you sit down and you want to decompose the base station into a radio RRU and a BBU, it's what do I do with the BBU? So there's a lot of BBU hoteling. If you look at the classical problem of people in a stadium and outside a stadium, you need 2 RANs for the same amount of people as they go in and out. So I think the adoption of cloudification versus cloud is real. And if you look at the work that I think AWS did with Dish and a few others, some of the work that Telus is doing with some vendors, it's predicated on, in the end, being able to mix and match and getting the flexibility of the vendors, right? Like North America is ripe with very small amount of vendors. People in the Middle East are very lucky. For North America and part of Western Europe, we don't have the Chinese vendors. So you've taken 50% of the providers of the world out of the market. So for us to get that competitive edge and flexibility, we have to do more stuff. So I think there's more apt work on Cloud RAN in North America than the rest of the world. Very different motivation.
Thank you. So from a security perspective, Shadi, I know also this region has its own nature when it comes to the sovereignty requirement and security and so on. So how do you see the adoption of network cloudification in the region here with respect to security?
So first of all, I won't get into the debate that my colleagues had. Our primary concern as Fortinet and a cybersecurity leader here is how do I maintain the security posture of our customers, with here service providers, but also their customers, whether it's business or consumers. And I just believe that moving mission critical elements to the cloud poses a lot of risk, especially now in the traditional manner. They're more isolated, I would say a bit of air gap. But now in the cloud, these becomes containerized. And how do I ensure the same level of encryption at rest and in transit? How do I continue that encryption end-to-end between those critical elements? How do I ensure network segmentation is done properly by either installing the firewalls or VLANs to make sure those elements are isolated and data storage is also secure? These are some of the approaches that we're having, or let's say active conversations we're having with our customers that are ongoing through that journey. And it is challenging. It's new, so we're still in the experimenting phase. But we have some production, already, or some of them are solutions in production protecting those. But yeah, these are some of the main concerns that we continue to hear.
Great.
Sorry, Shadi, I got a question here for you.
Shoot.
May I?
Please, but
Don't make it difficult.
Well, no. I mean, like, I empathize with what Fortinet's doing, but you have to admit, one of the challenges you have is almost 50% of people think of security as how do I protect the garden, and there's no more walls. So when Bernard says that security is job number 1 in the cloud, it's very true, but the key is given to every frigging client. So it depends who you give the client the key to. And then almost a lot of senior executives assume that, well, but I've got the firewall. And you would not believe how many times I've seen traffic go in and out of the same firewall 40 times. Well, it's still in the same cloud.
No, thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for actually.
So I think we have an education problem. When
100%.
we talk about cloud native, or thinking of the cloud, they have to stop thinking that they have a firewall that's protecting things when you've got all these windows open on purpose.
And you bring up a very good point. There is no more. There's no more a perimeter, right? The perimeter disappears, right, when you go into the cloud. There's no more IP addresses. It's more tags and labels. So definitely, it's not just a firewall, it's a platform, right? Now you need to go into how do I secure end-to-end, and it's different security solutions. A firewall is just a component, but how do I protect native applications? How do I ensure posture management, cloud posture management? Governance, policy, configurations are done properly. And most important is identity and access management. How do I get, who has privilege for that access? How do I ensure role-based access? So many dynamics that need to be baked into this journey. It's not just, oh, I have the firewall and I'm safe. No, that's just a minor component from an overall framework.
Great.
You guys
Thank you,
can hate-
Ibrahim.
You guys can hate me later. One last thing. And if you don't have the application right, security is more expensive on the cloud.
Yeah.
Oh.
If you have the right application, then it doesn't make sense not to.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
And it's just to address that as well.
Except Nokia's applications are all
Oh,
fantastic.
yeah, definitely. There are
Same thing
partners.
with Netcracker. They're like the best in the world.
But it actually, it has to happen as security by design, but also at the early stages of the software development side. So from a DevOps perspective, because now DevOps comes into play.
Different.
How do I review the code? How do I ensure there's no vulnerabilities or misconfigurations? So it's, again, not just a firewall. Firewall is just a very minor component.
Great discussion. Now, let's go to the next subtopic, which is the topic of the year, generative AI. So, what are the key use cases that we see in the network cloudification side when it comes to Gen AI? Maybe starting from Ari, of course, from a Netcracker perspective, the work around AI and machine learning has been there since a long time, especially from the IT applications, BSS, OSS. Now with the network side of things, where OSS also integrates, how do you see the generative AI use cases from your side?
So I think we will probably all agree that the initial use cases of Gen AI has been more customers facing. So it's, let's say, billing query and, working with the right data on the BSS OSS side to provide the right information, because you are really using that to reduce call to the call center or bring the average handling time down. Now then, going beyond that, I mean, initially that's the phase one of most of the use cases that we are seeing, whether we are doing with T-Mobile or working with Zoo or any of the other projects that we are working on, when Gen AI is part of the transformation programs, it's more customer facing. Now, going forward, there's also the whole discussion, as well as deployments and POCs, trials, whatever you call it, around how do you roll out fiber? How do you do the design for enterprise services a little bit more effectively? So internally, not just the end customer, but it's your internal engineers who can use that. Not that everything is going to become AI-driven right away, but at least you can do a lot of these things that needs, let's just say, X amount of resources. You might be able to, reduce that by 30, 40% in terms of designing the rollout stages. Some provisioning use cases, which are very repetitive, for example. You can bring efficiency into some of those things as well. So the transition of more customer-facing use cases and then moving more towards network use cases is slowly happening. There are some proactive assurance-centric use cases which can be used, especially for internal network engineers and users within the operator. So then it's just the users are a little bit different, whether it's the internal users or external. External used to be typically the end customer, enterprise or subscribers or typical consumers. Now it's the OSS type of use cases more for the internal engineers, the OSS people, the network engineers, and so on and so forth. It will take a little bit of time because you don't want the Gen AI or whatever AI you have to take over your network and do stuff that you don't want to. It's in a controlled environment. Yeah. Some of the stuff that can be done with the supervisor to at least take a look at it, or somebody senior to take a look at what goes into it, and then make the manual tweaks as necessary. But the efficiency gains that Gen AI brings, I mean, we can't discount for that. I mean, we have to look at it very seriously, and many of our customers are looking at that.
Yeah, I mean, moving on from the OSS part into the network, really, when we start to see Gen AI use cases being deployed for network observability, monitoring, and providing customer experience, not necessarily the end customers, but even the operation team on the network itself. How do you see that evolving from a network perspective, Daniel?
So I think for us on the network side, you know, these traditional AI, ML kind of use cases have been around. Anomaly detection is not new. This has been happening. Now with the advent of generative AI, I think fundamentally what we're seeing on the radio access side is building energy efficiency, which is a very topical thing for everyone right now, is to see how we can optimize network parameters by optimizing or shutting down cell features and so on to make sure that there's energy efficiency elements on the radio access. That's an element that we're starting to see. But if you look at generative AI, there is all the predictive care kind of elements. So we have something called a digital assistant. So that's becoming more and more of a play. Using LLMs, which are available now within Nokia, or using public LLMs as well, and creating a more dynamic, intuitive way of engineering teams to respond. But I think there is one further element which is coming in, which is more transformative, right? Which is things that we're probably looking at with cognitive, predictive, corrective actions. For example, our SON, we just demonstrated something in the region where we took 10,000 specific actions based on network behavior. So those cases, use cases are coming across. Again, there is a lot of effort to build what kind of repositories, large language models do you use to do this. It's not an easy task because it's a complex task. For generative AI to build on this, you need to ensure that the level of structured, unstructured data that is fed in to those large language models, it's reliable. And Nokia for now is using their own large language model, but there is no reason we can't expand that. And there was a discussion just now with a customer talking about using the local language models that are being built in the UAE and see how we can integrate that to maybe have a more impact in the region. So those apply back to the core as well. Some of the use cases that we're looking at on the transport side as well as on the core, just looking at how traffic optimization can happen, steering can happen, orchestration can happen. And when it comes to Cloud RAN, maybe last comment is that when we talk to our customers about Cloud RAN, we put a OpEx kind of chart that looks like this, right? Which typically does. That with time, you will see the cost going down. And we have this big pipe that says a lot of this will happen through orchestration and automation, using OSS, BSS elements, bringing in the orchestration elements, ensuring that we're able to use generative AI to optimize some of the things that we have a high cost on the integration as well as the deployment efforts. So, yeah.
So, I mean, to add to this, I mean, as you said, there's also the element of, there's a whole bunch of LLMs. An operator is not going to just go into and use one LLM. It could be multiple LLMs. And all these LLMs have their own different distinguishing characteristics, which they do certain things better than others. So the element of orchestration about which LLM to use for which particular functions and how do you relate that to the information that exists in your BSS, OSS systems or whatever, network management, EMS systems, etc., that part of that orchestration becomes very critical. Because you don't want to use the same thing
Definitely.
And then comes the small language models, right?
SLM.
When you talk about energy efficiency. Because that's another part of it. When we talk about sustainability and then we talk about Gen AI, it's kind of like an oxymoron in a way, because the amount of power, amount of energy that's needed to run these things are huge. And now you're talking about small LLM models, so there's too many of those models out there, and every one of them has very distinguishing properties and things they do very well. How can you bring it together in the right way, keeping in mind sustainability goals, keeping in mind what the end customers, whoever that might be, internal, external, is asking for, and how do you bring the best tool for the job, the best job?
Yeah.
I think that becomes very critical, and I think we're not there yet as an industry. I think there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, and this is something that from an AWS as well, we try to help customers to do, meaning training their models, creating small language models for specific use cases or large language models for bigger use cases. But that's a good, interesting point. Maybe my question now to Dr. Ibrahim, seeing some of the telecom initiatives like Generative AI Telecom Alliance, where EAN, SKT, and Deutsche Telekom are contributing, how do you see the creation of such alliance, how it reflects on the Gen AI use cases on the telecom industry?
I think the alliance, like the United Nations, provides a platform for people to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And the work that's been done with our colleagues from Deutsche Telekom and Korea is the right platform to discuss, but the people discussing it are the academics on both sides of the house. So to go back to Ari's point, when you talk about Gen AI, it's the actual person who gets called when something goes down. Those are not the guys talking about the alliances. I think it's very critical to sit down and see, what are we going to train the model, whether it's a small language model or a large language. It's irrelevant, the size. The piece is, am I going to trust it to learn and take away my job? And that's human nature. Very few people will do that so they can move on to the next thing themselves. So I think the work that's being done with the Alliance is an excellent platform to put it. But I think the telcos that don't have legacy or that are starting from scratch will benefit more than people with 150 years worth of planning, engineering, operations, provisioning. Like if you look at the OSS BSS transformation, the biggest challenge is not the technology.
It's the data.
Like Netcracker would love to replace everybody in our team with machines, and they probably have the technology. The question is, who's going to say, this is what I'd like you to replace?
And I think it's a valid point, right? When you talk about brownfield operator, which is where we are, right, in most cases, you cannot just say legacy can be just taken away, because you have to maintain that and then move on into whatever newer, shinier things that we are looking for. How do you create the right balance where you can at some point cap it and then grow the other things? But it takes time. And these transformation programs typically, it's not done overnight, right? It's complicated.
Time is passing quickly. Still have a lot of questions to cover, so I'll try to to manage myself.
It's my fault. I'm going to stop answering.
But the discussion is very interesting. I think I wanted to bring up another example of when it comes to network cloudification, but this time is more from a RAN perspective. So NTT Docomo have decided to introduce scalability on their RAN using cloud. So it's a good example that I like to show to the audience as well. So if please can you...
My name is Takatoshi Okagawa, Senior Vice President of NTT Docomo, and I'm in charge of the NTT Docomo R&D division. AWS is one of the most important strategic partners for NTT Docomo. Our collaboration is the most symbolized by the recent 5G core network on AWS and also VLAN project, as Docomo plans a nationwide deployment of VLAN starting in 2025. As a key component of VLAN, we have selected EKS Anywhere, provided by AWS as a virtualization platform, together with NEC VLAN software, Qualcomm hardware accelerator, and also HP hardware platform. With this VLAN architecture, we will be able to deploy new features with flexibility and shorter time to market, and also leverage COTS hardware and hardware accelerator, which are becoming more powerful and energy efficient for the broader market outside telecommunications. In addition, with EKS function, we can automate network management and operation, reducing OPEX and increasing network service availability. And we also expect the potential of the AWS ecosystem for the value creation. The benefits of its many service applications running on EKS and the engineers familiar with EKS tools and environments. For example, so we can leverage the ecosystem to add value to our network by running applications like AGI on VLAN platform, sharing the same computing resources. So finally, we are looking forward to further exciting collaboration and good outcome between AWS and NTT Docomo.
So across core and RAN, we're seeing now the adoption of cloud. Of course, for RAN, it requires edge solution like EKS Anywhere, like what was discussed, Kubernetes layer for the edge, but also includes some infrastructure from AWS. So moving to the next topic, because of the sake of time, and more focusing on security. And like what Bernard mentioned, security for us in AWS is a job zero, meaning every single service that we develop is as part of its design, security is inherently included in that design. But then How does network cloudification change the security landscape for telecom connectivity in general? Shadi.
So, great question. I'm not going to repeat some of the stuff that I said around how how this security play evolves in the cloudification journey, but it's acknowledged that the threat landscape just expands significantly once you open up into containers and microsegmentation and microservices. Now, the point is that there's methodologies to protect that. There's platforms now that we offer as well to protect the whole journey. But I want to spin it up and look at the opportunity. The threats, we already acknowledge, we're not going to repeat it. But on the opportunity side is that how can the service provider leverage this cloudification journey to roll out new security services? So monetization, because we always talk about, hold on, you need to buy this, you need to invest in this to protect. But okay, how can I also work on a multi-tenant approach, leveraging that cloudification journey to roll out services at scale and at speed? And a good example now is, I'm sure people will hear more and more about it, is SASE, or Security Access Service Edge. And how can you basically allow remote working, access to secure applications? And during COVID, I wish this was available back then, but when we had a major incident at a global level, we couldn't scale. This is where cloudification can play part, is that roll out those services, monetize it, scale it up and down as you need, and offer, of course, additional services.
This is on the network side, but then when we talk from a B2B perspective and B2C, how do you see telecom are leveraging security services for their B2B customers?
Great question. I can only think of one service that more and more applications are going to be used and more deployment of AI. And I didn't want to touch, or I didn't touch much on the AI, but how do you protect the data privacy? How do you ensure that those LLMs are secure, right? Mm-hmm. How do you ensure there's no data poisoning or exploitation? So there's security controls that need to be employed here to ensure that that data is anonymized, it's stored and encrypted properly for those LLMs to operate efficiently, and also for service assurance for the customers of those service providers.
Anything you would like to add, Dr. Ibrahim?
I have to be honest, Shadi lost me halfway through. So I'm following with Shadi all the way till the opportunity piece. So I think one of the challenges when you talk about cloudification of the effort, today we still cloudify in a construct area, and actually we put a lot of pressure on our vendors to maintain that posture. So when you look at Cloud RAN, it's still RAN. It's just I move certain pieces to the cloud. So I actually cause more complexity than if I said it's truly cloud. So if you look at the Outpost program that we started, I'm in love with that program. Google has the equivalent, so does Azure. But not one real telco, not one telco who's been in business for more than 10 years has taken that on because of the construct. Mm-hmm. So we actually complicated security because we actually want the cloud, but we want it the way we understand it today. Like we know there's a radio remote unit, there's a baseband unit, and then we say, well, what, you're not cloudifying. Like Nokia, you're dragging your feet. Fortinet, where's the security? And I think that's part of the problem. So it's not just culture, it's, we built it to sell it to people who understand it, but they don't really want cloud. They want the TCO of cloud. They want the ROI of cloud. But if you talk about complete cloud, why am I managing radio resource units? Mm-hmm. When if there's a large language model, Nokia has more base stations in the field, for example. Not that I'm anti or pro Nokia, but I'm being realistic. Nokia has more base stations globally than any one telco. Would you not, or Ericsson or Huawei, would you not trust them more than you would trust yourself? Academically, the answer is yes, but none of us do. Mm-hmm.
The issue is with AWS then, not with security.
It's the same, but this is the same with security. That's what made Palo Alto where they are today, right?
Yeah. I think there was one interesting point, if I need to, when you talk about that, I do like that, and I think maybe, I don't know if you address it, because when you look at Cloud RAN, there's only certain disaggregation happening, but when you do that, you create more complexity in terms of security. And to my understanding, security doesn't come up as much as a topic when you do that, right? There's less
Agree.
understanding.
And that's the
So
challenge.
what's the, that's truly the
It's
challenge.
not secure by design. It's secure by design when something screws up.
That's what, yeah. So it's only when you get hit by something is when you're going to start getting aware of that. And I think not bringing AI in, but if you bring this generative AI topic, we talk very nicely about it, but there are risks, inherent risks that come with generative AI of, like you talked about, protecting LLMs, but you know, they also have the same generative AI tool sets when you talk about, you know, cyber criminals or whatever you want to call them. So the risk is more replicated and enhanced, I guess, in some way.
To be honest, when you're looking at using an LLM to answer a customer inquiry, you are picking up very sensitive subscriber information.
Correct.
Okay, what is my roaming date? What is my, what is my payment information? All of that. Now you're dealing with the real-time customer data and then combining that with the LLMs out there, which is in the public domain. And the security protocol means that you have the right guardrails in place to make sure that after the answer is given to the end user, that particular information that is customer sensitive, it needs to be taken out and abstracted out from that. And if you don't do that effectively, then there are bigger problems with that.
Absolutely. And that's why security by design is key. The thing is, it always comes after that service.
Except it's not security by design.
It's
No,
not
exactly.
secure,
That's
but
what I'm saying. Yeah.
But if we want to talk about security, then we should tokenize the subscribers completely. But that means going back, applying techniques that are a bit too expensive.
Yeah.
And then the CTO might have money, but the CIO might not have money. And so it's both, you have to do it together.
So as we wrap up, what is your key observation for 2025 and 2026 for the adoption of cloud for network and telcos, for RAN and core? How do you see the growth, especially in the region here? The question starts with you.
I know we're over time, so I'll be very brief.
Yeah.
I think with the right cloud connectivity to the operator, there's no reason why all the core functions and BSS and OSS cannot be cloudified.
Okay.
One. Two, on the RAN itself, before Daniel comes in with what they're doing on the RAN, I believe the synchronization of resources, in particular, whether it's RAN control plane or the baseband, again, there's no logical reason why it cannot be cloudified if the cloud provider actually has presence and there's connectivity. And it's not just 2025, I think it's a journey, and we will see some cool new disruptors where they're allowed that will be cloud only.
Yes, and Daniel.
Look, I think we talked about it a lot. I think open architectures, I'm fully with you. I think it's time to disrupt, right? It is time to make changes. There should be cloudification, and we're committed to it. We want to build open architecture. It's part of what we want to do. And I see that moving faster than it has in the last 3 years. That's number one. The second thing is performance. Performance needs to be, and last time I was at a panel, there was another vendor on the panel, not a telco vendor. I said performance matters. When you go to open architecture, your performance parity, feature parity needs to be there. So that is important, and we're proud that we can continue as an industry, not just Nokia, to focus on that performance parameter, because here in the region, everyone is very sensitive to performance. We need to manage that. We can't let our customers down. That's the second thing. And I think the third thing I would probably, it's innovate or die. I think we are really there. So if we don't do that, we need to unlock, we need to uncover potential in telco, which is there. We've all been talking about it. I think it's time to change. Right?
Great. Shadi.
I think with the conversation of security in the cloudification journey, we're going to see more and more adoption of zero trust frameworks and models. So continuous verification and audit of devices and users that are accessing the cloud or those services on the cloud. More emphasis on LLM or LLM security, but also deploying AI and cybersecurity solutions in the cloud to make sure that cloud posture management is maintained, governance, audits, configuration, vulnerabilities, all those things have to be taken in place. And I think there's more and more adoption of that coming in the next 2 years to accelerate that movement, if, of course, it works as per the gentleman's arguments. So I think these are some of the main observations we see.
Thank you. Ari, your final remark?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take a look at it from an IT transformation standpoint, just because that's what we do. I think any of the digital transformation programs that we are running today, there is a whole cloudification angle to the story. So you digitally transform, but then the cloud as the future mode of operations is very much part of pretty much every single transformation. Either it's on you guys on AWS, where we are doing a whole bunch of projects, or some of your competitors, but that's part of the angle. The second, the digital transformation enables the data transformation as well, which then enables some of the Gen AI use cases on top of it. So the way we look at it in a phases is the digital transformation program is, once it starts and goes to a certain point of maturity, where you now have transformed your data, you now have normalized your data, you have cleaned up your data from a legacy system, so you have removed the duplicate rate plans and God knows what else that has been lying in the system for the last 25 years and cleaned it up.
Yeah.
Then you start using your AI and Gen AI and other strategies to make sure that it is effective. And I think that transition, that way of evolution is what we are going to see progress more and more as we go into the next year and the year after.
Great, and I agree with you. So before we complete, any 1 minute maybe, any question for the panelists before we close? Anyone? All right, perfect. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Martha.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martez.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry. Daniel.